Welcome to Oklahoma Memo. My name is Ryan Welton, the founder and curator of your daily local news recap. You can find it for free at oklahomamemo.com. And one of the things that we've added to, I say we, me, one of the things I've added to this are smart conversations, podcasts, they call them. And I have today the new president of AI and transformation for Saxum. This is an exciting topic. AI is the new hot thing. I use it every single day, not for the newsletter, but I use it in my daily life, and we're going to talk about this. But first, a quick welcome to Hart Brown from Saxum.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
I want to tell the audience a little bit about this very impressive man and his background. He's a recognized global leader in AI strategy, foresight, and complex systems transformation, and has spent more than 2 decades helping organizations navigate disruption and prepare for the future. There's always new disruption to be had, and this is just the latest. Hart's work has spanned more than 50 countries and has included guiding governments, Fortune 500 corporations, critical infrastructure operators through moments of uncertainty, innovation, and change, including the largest bankruptcies in U.S. history, major events such as the World Cup and the Olympics, and incidents of terrorism. And we're lucky enough to have him in Oklahoma City working for Saxum as president of AI and transformation. Before we get into talking about AI, though, what led you to this space today and what led you to Saxum?
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. Great to be here and great to talk about artificial intelligence in Oklahoma, two of my favorite subjects at the end of the day, and why I'm so excited about Oklahoma. And I know we're going to get to that. But as far as my trajectory and how I got here, so for the first part of my career, I was involved in algorithmic decision making. So running big math sort of algorithms to try and help understand what's likely to happen next. And if I can help organizations or government agencies understand what's likely to happen next, then we have some choices to make. How do we deal with whatever it is we're seeing that may be a transition, that may be a disruption, that may be something that we either need to avoid or take advantage of, one of the two. And so, over that period of time, I was asked in 2018, could I do what I was doing from an algorithmic basis? Could I load it into an AI and see if it would actually work and help us to understand how that would work real time? Now, in 2018, artificial intelligence was still in its infancy for the most part, and in fact, there were very few systems around that could actually allow you to do any of this. And so, I leveraged IBM Watson. Now, some of your viewers may remember Watson won Jeopardy. So I was able to actually leverage Watson and got it to be successful in 2018. And so with that, I've been involved in artificial intelligence ever since. How should organizations think about using it? How quickly should they leverage it? How should they govern and oversee it to make sure that they're doing the right things at the end of the day? And then, certainly, from a state and national perspective, what should we be thinking about on an infrastructure basis and an economic basis? All of that is incredibly powerful. And there is a moment in time now for Oklahoma that we can take advantage of should we choose to do so.
There's a lot to this next question, so I'll sort of like frame it this way. The question is, how would you describe the current AI landscape and what people should know about it right now? However, what I would add to that is there is some fear that people might be replaced by AI. There is some reticence within organizations to use AI. I mean, in the news space where I was, one of the big fears is that AI may take over the voice of talent or usurp uh, content that we produce on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of fear. And so and by the way, there's not only fear that AI may take our jobs or steal our content, there's fear that AI right now might be just a bubble. There were good numbers from Nvidia a couple of weeks ago, but still that fear is there. I heard Scott Galloway describe us as being at that 1997-98 point in terms of, like, if you remember the dot-com era. I
Of
remember, I
course.
was there. So with all of these things, where do you see us being with AI right now at the end of 2025?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so a lot to sort of decipher in that question. So first and foremost, on an economic basis, we've spent this year roughly 1.3, 1.4 trillion in the United States to build out the infrastructure. In the beginning of this year, there was about 1.7 trillion allocated. So we've deployed about 1.4 trillion. On forecast, and becomes really important for us to all understand, like, what's the North Star? Where is this heading over a period of time? We need about 4 trillion. And so if the question of, are we in a bubble right now or are we not in a bubble? Certainly there's going to be winners and losers. There always is in an economic transition. However, we're still not even halfway through capital expenditures to build the infrastructure that we need today. So I'm not purposely concerned that we are in an economic bubble yet. We still have a ways to go. We're still early innings, maybe halfway, almost halfway through the game, halftime, at least on expenditures. Now, having said that, what is something that, really is important for everybody to understand right now, and what is maybe one of the biggest misconceptions with artificial intelligence is one of scale. When I talk about those big numbers, the 1.4, 1.7, $4 trillion that we're investing into this, the goal is to get roughly 22 trillion back in economic value. So GDP, gross domestic product for the United States at the end of the day. So 4 trillion goes in, 22 trillion comes out every single year, and it's going to continue to grow. Scale becomes incredibly important. Most people today think of artificial intelligence as, okay, I'm going to grab an app, I'm going to load an app onto my system or my phone, and now I am AI enabled at the end of the day. What we need to understand is the reality of the business transformation that's going to occur. We're creating billions, roughly billions of AIs right now to integrate into everybody's business environment on a day-to-day basis. It's not one app, it's not one tool, it's not one chat GPT or Gemini or one of the others. It is, we are going to be using tens, hundreds, thousands of AIs in every single one of our business. That's really important to understand to get the economic lift, to get the productivity lift at the end of the day that we're looking for overall. Now, for most of the business leaders, when I explain that to them and start to go down this path of transformation, is how are we going to manage hundreds or thousands of AIs at the end of the day? We can do it. We can do it effectively, but it's the first step is to understand it's not one, it's a lot that we're going to be absorbing in a really short period of time. The last element of your question, which I think is incredibly important, and that's one of fear. There is a lot of fear with artificial intelligence. When it first came out a few years ago, ChatGPT, when it was dropped, it was a toy. It was fun. Everybody loved it. At the end of the day, we were creating fun pictures. Now we're starting to see it is economically viable. The tools right now will do about 3% of economically viable work globally today. That's doubling every 6 months. And so when I talk to organizations, one, I understand the fear. We are going to have to use systems. That's part of the process, part of the transformation we're going to go through. Having said that, we need a message, and this is really important for everybody and all of your listeners here today to understand we have to say and do the right things to establish trust within our own employees, within our own community as to how we're going to leverage the technology in a responsible and reasonable way. Now, the reality is I need on a labor basis, on an economic basis to get to the 22 trillion, I need everybody working and I need to add all of these AI tools into our business environment. If it's only one or the other, I don't win at the end of the day on an economic basis. So I need everybody to be involved. It's incredibly important for everybody to stay engaged and learn the technology as quickly as possible, but we are going to have to use it. And I need everybody as part of the solution.
I find more and more as I use it and I work with students and I work with other people's as part of my consultancy, I find that more and more that this isn't a replacement for people. This is a tool that we're going to have to learn. And I think back to I'm a musician. There's a piano back here. I don't know if you can see it, but I've been using Suno, and there are a lot of people. As a songwriter, an organic songwriter, they think it's just going to replace what we do. And I find that whether it was, and I go back to the days of Adobe Photoshop, and what it did to enable all the work we do. And so I understand the fear, but I personally am finding it more and more a tool that we're all going to have to use together. So even if there are situations where people are getting laid off, I think we're going to find that there are going to be more opportunities because of AI. And one of those opportunities is related to infrastructure. Even though data centers don't employ a lot of people after they're open, there is a construction element to this, and Google is investing a lot of money in the state of Oklahoma. So, what are some recent AI developments in the state of Oklahoma? And it might be Google's latest news here that we should know about.
Oh, it's another great question. And here's what I can tell you is there's good news and maybe some opportunities in this part of the conversation. Here's the good news. The good news is Oklahoma is perfectly positioned geographically and otherwise to become the AI center of the world should we choose to do so. Some really interesting opportunities here in Oklahoma. One, we are right on the fiber optic highway, so to speak, of the internet, which is incredibly important to be on. We're a business friendly environment. Energy costs are going to become an important part of this conversation. It already is in the early days. Oklahoma has an energy surplus. We're one of only 10 states that actually has an energy surplus. We have water. Now, it's differentiated between parts of the state, but we do have ample water, which is another part of the overall element of the infrastructure and the build out that we're going to have to do. So we are perfectly positioned to be able to do this. We're a business friendly state to be able to bring more and more economically viable, important businesses to the state. And that's something that we really should be focused on at the end of the day. Google is one example of that. They've done quite well in Oklahoma overall. They had one facility in Pryor. Now they're opening up two more. They're going to continue to invest in Oklahoma. They see it as advantageous for them. That's really important. That's a good signal. That's a good sign. They're investing about another 9 billion over the next 2 years to build out more infrastructure. What's interesting about what Google is doing, and they're not the only one, the others are doing very similar types of things. They're not necessarily wanting to come in and just run their business. They understand that they have to be a community partner. And when you look at all of the things that Google is doing right now in the state of Oklahoma, you can see they are absolutely trying to be a partner community by community and throughout the state overall, both on an education footprint as well as to build the labor force that they're actually going to need, that high skilled labor that they're going to need to continue their operations. So, some good things that are happening there. Here's the opportunities. Now they're investing about 9 billion. To give you a sense, Pennsylvania, they just got 100 billion. So there is an imbalance throughout the United States of where these companies are likely to go and what it is they're looking for. That's an incredible opportunity for us to continue to move the needle and bring more and more businesses into Oklahoma. So the last thing to sort of bring in as a potential opportunity for Oklahoma, and if you've seen the latest state chamber report, Oklahoma competes. Now there's a chart in there that's really important for us to pay attention to. While Oklahoma has been able to take advantage of net migratory inflows, meaning more and more people want to come to Oklahoma. That's fantastic. It's incredibly important for us as a state. What we've seen is we've had a net migratory outflow of high skilled advanced technology jobs. Now, that is a challenge. We need to address that challenge from an educational basis. We've got to go through some things to make sure everybody's ready for this transformation as a state, community by community, and company by company. So we are perfectly positioned to take advantage of this next era of business, but there's a few things we need to get right here in the next few years.
One of the concerns that I've heard in other stories, and I did a couple of podcasts with the folks at the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribe, who they're trying to do their own thing. They have a vendor who does native owned data centers and whatnot, but a lot of the constituency asks the question: are these companies, your Googles, the people who are building the data centers, are they givers or are they takers? And you talked about being a good community partner, but is there will there be an energy deficit? Are they going to take more energy? Are they going to take more electricity and more water than the value that we're getting here? Is that a reasonable concern?
It is a reasonable concern. It's an important part of the conversation, and I'll tell you there's two parts to that conversation. One is understanding where the electricity is coming from. Are they generating it on their own or not? That's an important element to this, meaning I don't want to pass on, higher rates to the ratepayers at the end of the day to make sure that that system makes sense. The water system is another one. Now, generally these systems will use surface water, so they'll create a reservoir and start recirculating water over and over and over again. It is important to understand how much water do they need and how much are they going to have to replace over a period of time. So those things, yes, really important to understand so we don't stress the community overall unnecessarily. The second part of this, and this is something that very few states, I'm going to say probably at this point, no state has really gotten this part of the conversation right. which is how do we look at these systems overall from a revenue perspective at the state level? And by that I mean, as you mentioned before, we generally think of a company coming in. How many jobs is that going to produce? And based on the jobs that it's going to produce and how much money they're going to make, we look at how much they're going to pay into the state. Now, these systems are quite different in the fact there's not a lot of jobs, as you mentioned before, per square foot in these facilities. So we need to think of a revenue model that makes sense for the state based on how much these systems are leveraged. And the easiest way for me to describe this, you ask an AI, for example, a question, you get an answer. I can argue that there's value created during that process. And so from a state perspective, there's some policy things and some elements that we can do to make sure the state benefits from this economic activity in a reasonable manner that makes sense for everybody and we don't overstress the communities.
That makes a lot of sense. And when I think about the opportunities that are going to be there, for whether it be in Muskogee or Pryor or Yukon or wherever these data centers are built, what are some of those opportunities? If I were to, if a student came to me and said, is it just me learning Chat GPT? What is the skill set that Oklahomans need to be looking toward to get themselves prepared for the opportunities as they come?
It's a fantastic question. And I get this question all the time. And I'm working with all the universities, everybody else here in Oklahoma to answer many of these questions. So, first and foremost, and Google's one good example, they do have educational opportunities that they are providing throughout the state for, in many cases, for free based on being that community partner. So there's an element there. Other companies are doing the same thing. If you just want to go out and try and learn on your own, there are online free services that will help you do that. Now that's just to get started. In order for, let's say, a student coming out of school and they're thinking about how do I get a job in this space? Like, what does the environment begin to look like? Then I really get into how do we teach these types of systems and how do we start to think about the systems. And so let me give you a quick example. NYU banned AI from a university perspective, higher education. Stanford, another great business school, at the end of the day, absolutely adopted it and they wanted to use it for everything. So, two very different ideas around how do we teach and get people prepared for the next part of our business environment. And the reality is, I tell people, is likely somewhere in the middle, meaning I'm going to assign you to go use the system. The assignment is not just to use the system, the assignment is to tell me why the system is wrong. And now what I'm doing is I'm developing a cognitive behavior that we're not just going to accept. This is one of the biggest problems that businesses are going to face over the next few years. I'm not just going to accept what comes out of the computer because it is inherently, in many cases, wrong. Now, it's still a great tool. It's going to get better and better over time, but I need people that can continue to think and supervise the system and understand when the system has done what it's supposed to do and it's right and when it is not right. That's one of the biggest values that are going to come out of this next few years with students and others coming into the workforce. But I would encourage everybody, because this is going to touch us all, in the business environment, I would encourage everybody to take it upon themselves to start learning more and more and more about artificial intelligence while we continue to enhance K through 12 education here in Oklahoma, while we continue to look at vocational tech and career techs, while we continue to build out programs even at the higher ed level, so we can have a sustainable model from an educational standpoint and a sustainable labor force here in Oklahoma to attract those businesses.
So it's not just about prompt engineering, it's about AI management. It's kind of like, a judgy babysitter. You're overseeing it, but I don't trust anything you're saying here. So but in all of these models, they are the dumbest that they will ever be today.
That's right.
Tomorrow they'll be a little bit smarter, and we keep going. So, when I think about the opportunities that are there for folks, I think about how everybody has their perceived flavor. But before I ask you some of these fun questions, I want to be sure to ask you about your role at Saxum, and I'm thinking as a manager, a director, a VP at a company, how would I know if reaching out to Saxum for AI help is right? Because I have to think that not only would there be a need on their part, but there are use cases on your part that would deem a company to be a good use case for this. So, how would I know if I'm a manager, director, or VP that Saxum would be right for me for this type of AI consultation?
Oh, it's a fantastic question. I think, and the first and foremost, anybody that's asking themselves that question right now are somebody that absolutely should reach out, and we should have a conversation on that. Every company is going to go through a transformation, whether we really want it to or not at the end of the day. So looking at who is going to go through that transformation, how fast you're going to go through that transformation. And I would tell organizations today, anybody that's interested in this space, you really have roughly from the time you start going through a bit of this transformational process, you have really about a year before you need to see material benefits, material impact in your organization. So there's a sense of urgency, there is a sense of time that goes along with that. So anyone that is interested in learning more about a transformational process within their own businesses should in fact absolutely reach out. The second part of that is as we go throughout this process, and we are continuing to build out more and more AI models here, is that some of those AI models, as you mentioned, are going to be important to everybody else in our community. And so for those that are interested in how to build out these models and what these models look like and how to do it reasonably responsibly within your organization, they should absolutely reach out and have a conversation.
Fantastic, and I'll be sure to put all the information to reach out to you in the show notes and et cetera, and on YouTube. But now, if it's okay, I want to ask you some fun
Of
questions.
course.
These have all been fun questions, but these are going to be the ones that I think will make the best short clips and whatnot. Okay, so let's talk about LLMs: ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude. Do you have a preference, a personal druthers?
No, it's so so no, I don't have a preference because they're all slightly different and they all do different things slightly better than their peers. And so I don't necessarily have one that I go to for everything. And this is important to understand is that they all do things a little bit different. Here's what I can tell you. Here's what's interesting. The general market right now, as you can see overall on a large scale, the general market has skewed historically towards ChatGPT. They were sort of the first and foremost on the market, and Anthropic, which is Claude. Everyone's kind of skewed towards those for different reasons. What you're starting to see is that more and more companies, I'm going to call it, are catching up. And so Google in the past week, 10 days or so, just released their latest model. Their latest model doubled from the previous model. They had Gemini 2.5, and now it's called Gemini 3.0. The capabilities of that model doubled in about 5 months. That is, as of right now, based on all testing criteria, is the most powerful model in the world at the moment. And so you're going to see all of these groups, and they release a model every 3, 4, 5 months, depending on what it is that they're doing. Every time they release a model, it's generally double the capabilities of the previous model. And so while Gemini is the biggest model right now, most powerful, highly likely in January, we may not see anything towards the end of this year, but early January, we're likely to see two or three more models that will be more powerful than that. And so we're going to continue down this path for the next few years until we really define what these models can do and understand what the economic viability of them is and where are the limits of the systems.
Those who on their desktop automatically default to Chrome or to Safari or to Firefox, I got news for you. 20 years ago, there was a browser war, and this reminds me of you had Explorer, and then it was Netscape. Who uses Netscape now? There was Opera. I mean, and so we don't really know who the winners are going to be yet, do we?
We don't know who's actually going to win, and that's a bit of the conversation now. Are we in a bubble? Are we not in a bubble? Will there be consolidation over a period of time as to who's actually going to win? Here's what's really interesting. When you look at the different players in the space and what the trajectory is for those players. So Google is interesting in the fact, I mean, OpenAI, ChatGPT is interesting. They were the first. They're continuing to sort of move the needle. They have the most users at the moment. Then you sort of have a player like a Google. Google owns all of their own infrastructure, so they're building their own chips all the way through the data centers, all the way through to the end result. And so they have a very verticalized approach of how they're doing that. That's different. That's interesting. At the end of the day, could they in fact leapfrog and potentially win? Then you look at XAI, Grok is another very interesting one at the end of the day. They own their own infrastructure, they're continuing to build out. Now, they're likely, because of the nature of the data that they have, based on Tesla and others, they have more physical data. So, in many cases, we're talking about these systems being very cognitive, meaning they can only run on a computer and answer questions. Where you see the data elements in a physical perspective, the cars and potentially now robots, which is highly likely to start seeing more and more of, does that actually give them a significant leg up as we transition to more and more physical systems? And the answer to that is highly likely yes, if they can actually do it in a responsible, reasonable way. So we don't know who's going to win. At the end of the day, each of them have their own sort of lane that they're starting to build out and create their own narrative as to why they're potentially better or more sustainable over a period of time.
Yeah, this is very interesting because it's not really X or Y axis solely. There's like that Z layer that's just a whole other thing because we may not just be talking about LLMs. Um, Elon Musk could be out there building his next version of Starlink via the humanoids and robots. Another question for you: yes or no? If you're going to be using one of these LLMs, pay for it. And I've advised people if you're going to do it, pay for it because that's the only way you can have any modicum of assurance that what you put into it could be protected.
So, yes, absolutely. That does give you an element of additional protection on how you use the information and how the information could potentially be used later on once it is collected into the system. Now, I can tell you, for the systems overall, right now, they've already absorbed virtually everything that's ever been written in the history of the world. And so there is no more data, historical data for these systems potentially use. So they're looking for more data. The more users they have, the more data they can potentially get, the more that they can build their models out. So yes, a paid service does give you an element of security that you wouldn't have otherwise. That's important. The second is, and this is going to be really interesting for organizations as well, and this gets to what's going to happen potentially next. You start to see as electricity costs go up, as the costs for these systems and these models go up, and they are over a period of time. Do you actually see more and more organizations bringing these systems back to being what we call on-prem or on premises? And therefore, you can, in fact, protect much of that data because it's all residing in the property, the four walls of your business at the end of the day. That's a very interesting dynamic for those organizations that are highly sensitive, that are thinking about AI and wanting to use it, but are still having concerns about what's going to happen with the data.
Fascinating. And I've got one more question for you, and I feel like Oklahoma Memo listeners and viewers, some of these are selfish, but I hope that you have the same questions too. I'm a musician. I'm a songwriter. I recently paid for Suno. I have hundreds of songs that I've written over the years that I did organically on piano. I've recorded them. They're on YouTube, and then I pop that in and create a cover of myself in Suno, and it's amazing. All of a sudden, I have a viable demo. But I also understand that Suno just settled a lawsuit with Warner Music Group, not because I did anything wrong with my cover here. However, the entire system was trained on other legitimate artists, organic artists from the history. But look, you and I both know that the world is moving toward this, whether it be for production, for demos, not a lot different than what DJs did 20, 25 years ago, not a lot different from what Logic Pro X is. But what I wanted to ask you about was the creative community, whether it be music or movies and intellectual property. I don't see a universe in which AI doesn't infiltrate this, but like everything else you and I have talked about, Hart, this is going to be sort of human led. Do you agree?
Absolutely. So human-centric, human-led, and here's what I would tell you is we've seen, in the very beginning of ChatGPT, it was a toy. It was fun. Like everyone wants to use it. We're generally positive about it. The same thing we're starting to see music industry, and we just had a handful of songs that were released, AI released, that hit the Billboard, the top of the Billboard charts. Now, it's very early days. It is something that's unique and fun, and people will listen to that today because it's we want to understand. We're curious at the end of the day. What I do believe in the creative communities, we're going to see a bifurcation. Will there always be AI images or certain things that are out there at a very low cost sort of commoditized basis. If I just want to put something up on my wall, fine, get something AI and put it up on the wall, and it's very low cost. I do believe we are going to continue to value, and I think we're going to double down on valuing those elements, those creative elements that were actually done by individuals. I want to put the not a picture, an AI picture on my wall. I want to put a painting on my wall. I want to know who actually painted that. I want to see the signature on the bottom. I want to know the story behind it. I want to know the scene that they were looking at or the position that they were in when they painted this picture or whatever it was that was going on. I want that connection. And we don't have that with AI, and nor will we, in many cases, have that in any sort of future state that we can see right now. And so I do think there will be a bifurcation. There'll be some of that still exists, but I do believe we will begin to value more and more and more those things that were created by those people that we admire, that we can talk to, that we can hear their story, that we understand what they were going through, and that was created.
So, do you see AI as viable tools for those industries, or do you think that largely they will be rejected in the name of that organic experience?
Some of both. And I'll tell you, even in and this is an industry that I thought would be a bit more open to it. But there's even in the past week or so in the gaming industry, so video game industry, which everything you're seeing is computer generated in some form or fashion. You may have had people that actually created the images, but still very computer generated. They're actually seeing within the games themselves those things that were AI generated, and they don't like it. They're pushing back. And so I do believe there will be a pushing back of those organizations that try and go too far too fast and do everything via AI. AI will always be around. It'll be a tool. We will continue to use it. But I do think we need that connection when it comes to the creative environment.
Think you said it too far, too fast, and I think that's where an organization like Saxum and yourself, as president of AI and transformation, could kind of help set the boundaries, the speed
That's right.
limit. If you go, am I missing anything? Is there anything that I failed to ask?
So here's what I would say, because this is a lot. And I talk to a lot of people every day, and they tell me at heart, I understand it. I understand the sense of urgency. This is something that I am afraid of at the end of the day. And so help me to sort of put a star on this so I understand what the rationale, why are we going down this path? And the general consensus is by 2030, about 30% of what we all do every day is going to be automated away. And my response to that is that's quite interesting. So what do we do? Let's assume that actually happens. What do we do with that extra 30% of our time that we just got back? And I said, wouldn't it be nice? Every piece of technology up to this point, I would say, has caused us to be less and less human. From the time the printing press was created, we had to talk before the printing press. I love books, but we had to talk before then. And so every piece has sort of made us less and less connected overall. Can we, should we, and I hope we do, take that 30% of our time and say, okay, I'm going to spend more time with family. I'm going to spend more time with friends. I'm going to go have that cup of coffee. I'm going to go watch that soccer game. I'm going to go do whatever it is, go to dinner with friends. I'm going to do those things that I've been saying no to because I say, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. So I think if we really want to think about what's the end of the rainbow, what's the pot of gold at the end of the day, is does this technology actually help to make us more human and make us more connected? And I think that's a very interesting, bright spot that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Hart Brown, the president of AI and transformation for Saxum. The fascinating conversation. I hope we can talk again as
Yes.
AI developments happen. Maybe a prediction segment every year, or you reach out to me when something really important pops up in this space. But I want to thank you again for joining us here on the Oklahoma Memo podcast. Hart Brown, president of AI and transformation with Saxum.
Thank you so much.
Those of you who are watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. Please leave a question. I'll make sure it gets to Hart. Like and subscribe. And if you're listening on a podcast, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a 5-star review, it helps us get discovered in the podcast algorithm. Of course, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Have a great day.